Axel stopped barking the second the hidden door started shaking from the other side. Wes hit the floor as dust rained from the ceiling, and something heavy slammed once beneath the old house. The German shepherd stood frozen at the top of the basement stairs, ears pinned forward, staring into the dark like he recognized whoever or whatever was down there. Then the power flickered out. What do you think was behind that door? The old Chevy shuddered in the freezing Montana wind as Wes Carter killed the engine beside mile marker 43. Snow drifted sideways across the highway in thin silver ribbons, hissing against the rust-speckled hood. For a long moment, he just sat there with both hands resting on the steering wheel, staring through the windshield at nothing. The truck behind him blew a tire. The explosion cracked through the mountainside like incoming mortar. Wes flinched so hard his shoulder slammed the driver's door. His right hand shot instinctively beneath the seat before his brain caught up with the sound. Breath trapped halfway in his chest, eyes snapping to mirrors. Tree line, rear shoulder, overpass. Convoy reflex, not Montana, not Fallujah. The semi drifted to the shoulder 100 yards back, steam rolling from shredded rubber. Wes exhaled slowly through his nose and rubbed a trembling hand across the gray stubble on his jaw. Axel lifted his head from the passenger seat. The German shepherd's ears twitched once. Amber eyes fixed on Wes, calm and watchful. "I'm good," Wes muttered. The dog kept staring another second before lowering his head again. Outside, dusk settled over the Bitterroot Range like bruised blue smoke. Pines climbed the mountainsides in endless black walls, and the road ahead disappeared into falling snow. Wes checked the mirrors one more time before restarting the Chevy. Always know your exits. Always leave yourself room. The habit had outlived the war. So had most of the bad things. 3 hours later, he rolled into the tiny mountain town of Black Ridge. Population barely 800, if the faded wooden sign was telling the truth. Most of the storefronts were dark. One gas station, one diner with a buzzing neon sign, a church with snow piled halfway up steps. Nobody looked at him long, but they looked enough. People always knew when someone didn't belong. The Chevy rattled past the diner slowly. Warm yellow light spilled across the icy parking lot. Inside, old men sat over coffee mugs beneath mounted elk heads and Christmas decorations that should been taken down weeks ago. Wes almost stopped. Hot food sounded good. A real chair sounded even better. Instead, he drove on. 8 months sleeping in parking lots and rest stops had taught him something dangerous about comfort. The second you relaxed, something took it away. The road narrowed as he climbed toward Black Ridge Mountain. Snow thickened. Tires crunched over old gravel. Pines closed around the truck until the headlights barely reached beyond the trees. Axel suddenly sat upright. Wes noticed immediately. The dog's posture changed first. Then the ears. Then the stillness. "You hear something?" Axel stared into the woods. Wes slowed the truck. Nothing out there except dark timber and blowing snow. Still, his pulse ticked higher. Canines didn't waste energy reacting to nothing. A few minutes later, the trees opened. The house appeared without warning. Dead Pine House. That's what the lawyer in Missoula had called it over the phone. The place sat alone on the mountainside beneath towering pines, its shape half buried in darkness and snow. 2 stories. Old cedar siding weathered almost black. Sagging porch. Stone chimney leaning slightly west. One upstairs window cracked. The house looked less abandoned than forgotten. Wes shut off the engine. Silence rolled over the mountain immediately. No traffic, no voices, only wind moving through pine needles somewhere high above. He stayed inside the truck a while, staring at the place Caleb had left him, his brother. Hell, brother barely felt accurate anymore. They hadn't spoken in almost 9 years. Not after the funeral. Not after Wes punched him outside the VFW hall while everybody watched. Neither one of them ever apologized. Then 2 weeks ago, a lawyer tracked Wes down at a truck stop outside Billings and handed him an envelope with Caleb's death certificate. Inside, heart failure, age 67, no wife, no children, just the house. Wes opened the glove compartment and pulled out the folded letter again. Mr. Carter, your brother specifically requested that the property not be sold until you personally visited Black Ridge. He stopped, reading there. The same place every time. Axel whined softly. Yeah, Wes murmured. Let's see what he left us. The cold hit hard when he stepped outside, sharp enough to sting his teeth. Axel jumped down beside him, paws crunching into snow. The dog moved close immediately, scanning the tree line. Old habits. Wes grabbed his duffel from the truck bed and climbed the porch steps carefully. The wood creaked beneath his boots. One weak porch bulb flickered overhead. That stopped him cold. He looked up slowly. The electricity was on. Nobody had mentioned that. Axel's ears tilted forward. Wes unlocked the front door. The smell hit first. Dust, old wood smoke, damp cedar. Something underneath it all that reminded him faintly of motor oil. The flashlight beam swept across faded furniture covered in sheets. A stone fireplace, bookshelves, family photographs still hanging crooked on the walls. Caleb had left everything exactly where it was, like he expected to come back. Wes moved room by room automatically, checking corners before entering, clearing sightlines, windows, rear exits, kitchen last. Axel padded silently beside him the entire time. The kitchen sat at the back of the house facing the forest. Old cast iron stove, rust stains in the sink, cabinets hanging crooked from hinges. Beyond the kitchen was a narrow, dark hallway leading toward what looked like a pantry and rear mudroom. Wes set the flashlight down. You hungry? Axel didn't move. The dog stood frozen at the mouth of the hallway, not barking, not growling, just staring. Every muscle in his body tightened slowly beneath the dark fur. Wes felt it immediately, that pressure, that tiny shift in the air soldiers learned to notice before contact. He looked toward the hallway. Darkness sat there thick and still. The bulb above the sink buzzed softly. Then Axel let out a low growl, not loud, not aggressive. The kind of growl a trained dog makes when it finds something it doesn't understand yet. Wes stared into the darkness at the end of the hall, and somewhere deep inside the house, something metallic clanged once beneath the floorboards. Wes did not move. Axel's growl faded into a breath, so low it was almost part of the wind outside. The dog stood at the mouth of the rear hallway, head lowered, ears forward, one paw lifted just above the floorboards as if touching down might trigger whatever waited underneath. Wes reached slowly for the flashlight on the kitchen counter. No sudden movements. Old rule. He swept the beam across the hallway. Peeling wallpaper. A row of coat hooks. An old broom leaning in the corner. The pantry door at the end stood half open, its black gap narrow as a cut. Nothing moved. Then the house settled with a long wooden groan. Wes let the light hold on the pantry door another second before stepping forward. Axel moved with him, shoulder close to Wes's knee, not ahead this time. The dog's nails clicked once on the worn boards, then went silent. The pantry smelled like mouse droppings, dust, and old flour. Empty shelves lined both walls. On the floor sat a dented coffee can, a cracked jar of nails, and a stack of newspapers yellowed at the edges. Wes nudged the can with his boot. It rolled away and tapped the baseboard. Axel did not care about the can. He faced the wall beneath the back stairs. That was when Wes noticed the draft. Cold air breathed through the room from somewhere it had no business being. Not from the window, not from the ceiling. From low down near the floor, under the stairs, where the wall had been patched with cheap pine paneling, painted the same dull cream as the rest of the kitchen. Wes crouched, joints popping softly. He placed his palm near the panel. Cold air brushed his skin. Axel leaned forward and sniffed along the seam, slow and deliberate. Then he backed up 2 steps and sat, waiting. Yeah, Wes whispered. I see it. He didn't open it that night. Not because he was afraid. Fear was too simple a word for the thing that moved through him. It was calculation. Unknown structure. Old house, no cell signal. One flashlight, no backup. Dog tired from the drive, man older than he liked admitting. He closed the pantry door, wedged a chair beneath the knob, and slept in the kitchen with his back against the cabinet and a tire iron beside his right hand. Axel did not sleep much. Every hour or so, Wes opened his eyes and saw the dog standing in the same spot, staring at that pantry door. Morning came gray and hard. Snow had stopped, but the mountain held the cold like stone. Wes made coffee on a camping stove he set on the kitchen counter and fed Axel from a paper bowl. The dog ate half, then returned to the pantry. "Not even breakfast first," Wes said. Axel's tail did not move. By noon, Wes had walked the property. The house sat higher than he expected, built into the shoulder of Black Ridge with a steep drop behind it and thick pine rising on three sides. A collapsed shed leaned near the tree line. Beyond that, a rusted cable fence ran toward the remains of an old silver mine. The mine entrance had been sealed with concrete decades ago. A weather-beaten sign still hung crooked from chain link. "Danger. Unsafe ground. Keep out." Wes stood there a long time. The wind came down through the pines and moved over his neck. He scanned the ridge out of habit. High ground, approach routes. Dead space behind the shed. One narrow road in, no easy way out except through the trees. A bad place to be surprised. By late afternoon, he drove into Black Ridge for supplies. The diner sign said Nora's in red letters that buzzed in the snowlight. Inside, the air smelled like coffee, bacon grease, and wet wool. Conversations thinned when Wes entered, then resumed in lower tones. Axel stayed close beside his leg. A woman behind the counter looked up from pouring coffee. Late 50s, maybe early 60s. Silver-black hair tied back, eyes sharp enough to cut rope. "You lost?" she asked. "Depends what you mean." That earned half a smile. "You're the Carter brother." Wes took a booth near the window where he could see the street and the truck. "Guess so." She set a mug in front of him without asking. "Nora Bennett," she said. "Caleb used to sit right where you're sitting. Always had a notebook. Always ordered coffee and forgot to drink it." Wes looked at the steam curling out of the mug. "He do that a lot?" "Toward the end, yes." "The end?" Nora glanced toward the old men at the counter, then lowered her voice. "Your brother asked too many questions before he vanished." Wes kept his face still. "Lawyer said heart failure." That's what the paper said too. Her eyes held his for just a moment longer than comfort allowed. Then she looked down at Axel. "Pretty dog. He knows." Axel sat, but his eyes never stopped moving. Nora noticed. "Caleb had that same look," she said, "like he was counting exits even in a room with one door." Wes said nothing. She refilled his coffee, though he had barely touched it. When Wes bought nails, batteries, canned food, and a new pry bar from the general store, the clerk watched him through the whole transaction. Not rude, just careful, like selling supplies to a man standing too close to a cliff. Back at the house, dusk had already gathered beneath the pines. Wes stacked firewood by the stove, patched a broken window with cardboard, and checked the pantry door again. The chair was still wedged under the knob, but it had shifted, only an inch. Maybe the wood settled. Maybe the floor sloped. Axel pressed his nose to the gap beneath the door and let out one sharp breath. That night, the wind rose. The old house clicked and sighed around them. Branches scraped the siding. Somewhere upstairs, a shutter knocked in uneven rhythm. Wes lay on top of a sleeping bag in the front room, boots still on, coat rolled beneath his head. He tried closing his eyes. A flash of white light came through the cracked curtains as a truck passed far down the mountain road. For half a second, it was not headlights. It was a flare over a broken street in Fallujah. His hand closed around the tire iron before the memory finished forming. Axel rose from beside the stove. The dog walked to the kitchen. Wes sat up. "Axel." The shepherd didn't turn. He entered the pantry hallway, slow and low, moving like he had been given a scent trail. Then came the sound again, Clang. Closer this time. Not under the kitchen. Behind the wall, Axel lunged. His paws hit the pine paneling beneath the stairs with a hard, frantic scrape. Once. Twice. Then he began clawing in a steady rhythm, tearing paint and splinters loose. Axel. Off. The dog stopped at once but did not back away. Wes came up behind him with the flashlight. The beam caught what Axel had uncovered. Not rot, not foundation stone. A strip of metal. Painted over. Wes knelt and scraped at the wall with his pocket knife. Layers of old cream paint flaked away. Beneath them was a rectangular outline, narrow and deliberate, hidden behind the paneling, like a scar someone had tried to make disappear. He worked the prebar into the soft wood. The first plank came loose with a crack, then another. Cold air poured through the widening gap. Axel stood rigid beside him. Wes pulled the last broken board free. Behind the wall, set low into a frame of dark concrete, was an old steel lock plate. Thick, industrial, painted over so many times it looked like part of the house. At its center was a keyhole. Not for a house key, for something heavier. Something meant to keep people out, or keep something in. Wes aimed the flashlight lower. There, beneath the dust and layers of chipped paint, was a steel hasp bolted into a hidden door. The lock itself was black with age. Axel leaned forward, sniffed it once, then looked up at Wes. For the first time since they arrived, the dog whimpered. Wes had heard Axel growl at strangers, snap awake at thunder, and stand dead still when coyotes moved beyond a fence line. He had never heard that sound from him before. Not fear, exactly. Not pain. Something closer to warning. The kind a dog gives when the ground in front of you is not ground. Wes rested one hand on the back of Axel's neck. The fur there was raised in a hard ridge. "All right," he said quietly. "We do this slow." He went out to the truck and came back with a canvas tool roll, a crowbar, a headlamp, and the old mechanic's gloves he had worn through 3 winters. He also grabbed the tire iron, though he set it within reach instead of holding it. A man holding a weapon thinks like a man expecting a fight. Wes needed to think like an engineer first. The hidden door was smaller than he expected once the rest of the paneling came down. Not a full doorway, more like a crouched entry, built into the concrete beneath the rear stair structure. Whoever installed it had framed the whole thing behind the pantry wall, then covered it with pine boards and paint until it disappeared into the house. The lock was not ordinary. Wes wiped grime from the metal with his sleeve. It was thick, recessed, almost flush with the steel plate. No brand name, no cheap hardware store stamp. A military lock, or close enough to make his stomach tighten. He angled the flashlight across the surface. There, under the paint and dust, was a faint marking. USACE. The letters were barely visible, but they were enough. Wes stopped breathing for a second. He had seen those letters in places where roads ended and bad decisions began. Stenciled on concrete barriers, stamped on survey crates, painted on tunnel equipment near Army Corps projects that no civilian ever got to see. Iraq had been full of old structures nobody wanted to claim until somebody had to go inside them. The house creaked above him. Axel pressed closer. Wes put the flashlight down and sat back on his heels. "Caleb," he whispered, "what the hell did you build under here?" The answer did not come. Only wind. Only the low moan of Black Ridge pushing cold air through hidden seams. The first attempt did nothing. The lock would not turn, would not shift, would not even complain. Wes tried a flathead, then the pry bar, careful at first, then harder. Metal scraped metal in harsh little bursts that made his jaw clench. The sound carried him somewhere else. A rusted hatch outside Fallujah. Hot air, dust, someone behind him breathing too fast. A young Marine with a wedding ring tied to his bootlace whispering, "Clear." Then a voice over radio, sharp and broken by static. Contact left. Wes blinked. The pantry wall came back. Cold Montana air. Axel's shoulder against his knee. He looked down and realized his hand had locked around the pry bar, so hard his knuckles had gone pale. "Not there," he said under his breath. Axel nudged his wrist once. Wes let go of the bar and flexed his fingers until they worked again. The second attempt was smarter. He scraped away the paint around the hasp and found old screws beneath layers of sealant. Not screws, bolts, heavy ones, countersunk into steel. He worked them loose one at a time, sweating despite the cold. It took nearly an hour. By the end, his shoulders burned and his breath fogged in front of him. The last bolt dropped into his palm. The hasp sagged. Something inside the door released with a dull internal clunk. Axel backed up 2 steps. Wes hooked his fingers into the edge and pulled. Nothing. He pulled again, harder. The door held like it had become part of the mountain. He drove the crowbar into the seam and leaned his weight into it. For a long second, nothing changed. Then the seal broke. The sound was deep and ugly, a wet metallic groan that seemed to come from below the house rather than in front of him. Dust spilled from the edges. Cold air pushed through the gap and washed over Wes's face. Not basement air, dry air, still air. Air that had been waiting. The hidden steel door opened 6 inches. Beyond it was blackness. Axel did not enter. That told Wes more than any warning sign could have. He clipped the headlamp onto his cap and widened the door with one slow pull. The hinges screamed once, then gave. The opening revealed a narrow concrete stairwell descending beneath the house at a steep angle. The walls were cinder block, the steps poured concrete, the handrail steel pipe worn smooth by use. There were no cobwebs across the stairwell that bothered him. Old hidden places had webs, dust patterns, dead insects, signs that time had been sitting still. This stairwell had dust, yes, but not enough. Someone had used it. Maybe not recently, but later than the house wanted him to believe. Wes held Axel by the collar before the dog could move. "Stay behind me." Axel ignored the words and stepped beside him instead. Wes almost smiled. Figures. They descended slowly. 1 step, pause. Listen. Another step. The air grew colder but not damp. The smell changed as they went down. Old oil, paper concrete. A faint metallic tang, like a toolbox left shut for years. Halfway down, the wind above disappeared. No house creaks, no pine branches, no mountain. Just the scrape of Wes's boot soles and Axel's quiet breathing. At the bottom was another short passage, 10 feet long, ending in a heavier door standing open. Wes swept the beam across the threshold. No movement. He touched 2 fingers to the wall. Dry. The passage opened into a room. Wes stepped in and froze. The space was larger than anything that should have fit beneath that old house. 20 feet wide at least, maybe more. Built into the slope itself. Cinder block walls, reinforced ceiling. A ventilation unit mounted high in the corner, still and silent. Metal shelves lined one side, holding sealed boxes and dusty equipment cases. An olive green field radio sat on a table beneath a cracked plastic cover. On the far wall, filing cabinets stood in a row. 6 of them, each labeled in faded block letters. Water, soil, medical, mine access, Redstone, C. Carter. Wes stared at the last label. Caleb's initial, his brother's name reduced to black marker on masking tape. Axel moved past him, nose low, circling the room once. He did not wander. He worked the space the way trained dogs worked a perimeter, corners first. Air vents, door seams, places people forgot to look. Wes approached the table. Beside the field radio was a cassette recorder, an old silver one, with one button cracked. A stack of tapes sat next to it, each marked with dates, some from the late 80s, some newer. He picked one up. The handwriting was Caleb's. Jan 12 Well 6, sample Bennett Creek. Wes turned slowly toward the filing cabinets. He opened medical first. The drawer resisted, then slid out with a grinding whisper. Folders, dozens of them. Old hospital forms, county health records, photocopies. Handwritten notes in Caleb's tight, slanted script. Names, ages, addresses, diagnosis, leukemia, kidney failure, birth defect, neurological tremors. West's throat tightened. He opened another folder. A photograph slipped out and landed face up on the concrete. A little girl in a yellow winter coat stood beside a snowman, missing front tooth, dark curls, smile wide enough to hurt. On the back, in Caleb's handwriting, were 3 words they knew. Wes held the photograph in both hands. The room seemed to shrink around him. Axel suddenly lifted his head. A low growl rolled from his chest. Not toward the stairs, toward the back of the bunker. Wes turned his headlamp. Behind a stack of storage crates, almost invisible in the wall, was another door, smaller, steel, locked. Axel walked to it, pressed his nose against the seam, and went perfectly still. Then, from somewhere beyond that second door came the faintest sound, a click, like old machinery waking up in the dark. Wes killed his flashlight instinctively. The bunker vanished. For one sharp second there was only darkness, Axel's breathing, and the old combat reflex clawing up through his spine. Freeze, listen. The silence stretched, no footsteps, no voices. Then came a low mechanical hum somewhere beyond the second steel door, weak, uneven, like power trying to move through dead wires. Axel stood rigid beside the door, head tilted slightly, ears forward toward the sound. Wes clicked the flashlight back on and swept the beam carefully across the room again. Nothing had changed. Still, the air felt different now, like the bunker knew it had been found. "Back," he whispered to Axel. The dog obeyed immediately, but stayed close enough that his shoulder brushed Wes's leg. Wes approached the second door slowly. Unlike the first entrance upstairs, this one looked newer, cleaner weld lines, thicker hinges. The lock mechanism sat recessed into reinforced steel. Somebody had wanted whatever lay beyond it sealed tighter than the rest. He crouched and studied the floor. Dust, boot prints, old ones, not his. Not Caleb's either, at least not recent. The tread pattern was too modern. Deep lug tactical soles. Maybe 2 people, maybe 3. Wes felt the muscles along his neck tighten. Someone else had been down here after Caleb died. Axel let out another low rumble. "Yeah," Wes said quietly. "I know." The mechanical hum stopped abruptly. Silence again. Wes straightened slowly and stepped back from the door. Whatever was behind it could wait. Right now, he needed information. He moved to the radio table and picked up the cassette recorder. Dust coated the buttons, but when he opened the compartment, the batteries inside looked surprisingly fresh. That bothered him too. Nothing about this bunker fit abandonment anymore. He selected the newest tape from the stack. The label read, "April 11, if something happens to me." Wes slid it into the recorder. For a second, only static crackled through the tiny speaker. Then Caleb's voice emerged, older than Wes remembered, tired. "If you're hearing this," Caleb said, "it means they finally came back for the house." Wes lowered himself slowly into the metal chair beside the table. Axel stayed standing, still watching the second door. "They'll say I disappeared," Caleb continued. "Or drank myself to death somewhere. Hell, maybe they already did. But if they're back, it means they're scared, which means I was right." Paper shuffled near the microphone. Wes closed his eyes briefly at the sound of his brother's voice. 9 years vanished in an instant. Suddenly, he could see Caleb at 17, skinny and sunburned, trying to rebuild a dirt bike engine behind their father's garage while country radio played through a busted speaker. Then the memory disappeared again beneath concrete walls and bunker air. "The contamination started in the late 80s, Caleb said. Black Ridge wasn't just silver mining after the collapse. Redstone got federal contracts after Desert Storm, then Afghanistan, then Iraq. Waste disposal, equipment breakdown, chemical runoff. Things nobody wanted on paper." Wes opened his eyes slowly. His hand tightened around the recorder. "They buried everything under the mountain," Caleb said, "and the county signed off on it." Axel's growl deepened. Wes looked toward the second door again. Nothing moved. But now he noticed something else, a faint vibration under his boots, like a generator cycling somewhere deeper underground. "Water tables got hit first," Caleb continued. "Then livestock. Then people," the tape hissed. Wes stood and walked to the medical cabinet again. He pulled another folder at random. A boy, age 11. tumor diagnosis, another file. A woman in her 30s, kidney failure. Another, a minor neurological damage. Each folder had notes in Caleb's handwriting, dates, water sample readings, references to county records that no longer existed. Wes stared at the numbers until they blurred. Outside the bunker walls, wind moaned faintly through the mountain. Then Caleb's voice lowered. "You remember Tommy Vance?" Wes froze. Tommy Vance, 18 years old, high school linebacker, died in what the papers called a mine collapse in 1996. Wes remembered carrying the coffin with 3 other boys because Tommy's father was too drunk to stand. "He found contaminated barrels near Shaft 12, Caleb said. 3 weeks later, he disappeared underground." Wes swallowed hard. Axel suddenly left the second door and trotted toward the stairs leading back up to the house. The dog stopped halfway there and stared upward, listening. Wes muted the recorder instantly. At first, he heard nothing. Then, crunch, outside, tires on snow. Wes moved without thinking. Flashlight off, one hand grabbing the tire iron, the other touching Axel's shoulder twice. Quiet signal. The dog lowered immediately. Another crunch echoed faintly from above. Vehicle weight. Heavy. Not on the main road. Closer. Wes climbed the stairs slowly until he reached the top landing, beneath the hidden pantry wall. He killed the headlamp and listened through the narrow cracks. An engine idled outside the house. Not the Chevy. Different sound. Larger truck. Axel's ears twitched toward the front side of the property. Doors opened, 2 of them. Wes felt adrenaline move cold and steady through his chest. Not panic. Training? He checked his watch automatically. 2,117 hours. Full dark outside. Minimal visibility. 1 approach road. No cell signal. He crouched beside the hidden door and listened harder. Boots moved across the porch overhead, heavy enough to make old wood creak. Axel's lips pulled back slightly from his teeth, but the dog stayed silent. Good dog. Very good dog. A flashlight beam swept briefly across the kitchen floor above them through gaps in the boards. Someone was inside the house. Wes's breathing slowed automatically. Combat breathing. In 4, hold. Out 4. Another voice drifted faintly through the floorboards. Male. Too muffled to make out words then. A second voice answered. Wes closed his eyes, listening. The accent hit first. Local. Mountain country. One man laughed softly. The sound rolled through Wes like ice water. Because he recognized it, Sheriff Dale Mercer. The sheriff's boots crossed the kitchen, slowly overhead, not searching, inspecting. A cabinet opened, then closed. Another pause. Wes could almost picture the man standing in the pantry doorway above them right now, listening to the same silence. The cassette recorder suddenly crackled in Wes's hand. Caleb's recorded voice burst from the tiny speaker before Wes could stop it. "If they find this bunker," the words echoed sharply through the concrete stairwell. Upstairs, the footsteps stopped instantly. Silence slammed down over the mountain house. Then came Sheriff Mercer's voice from directly above the hidden wall. Low. Calm. Too calm. "I know somebody's down there." Axel stepped in front of Wes. And upstairs, very slowly, the pantry chair scraped across the floor. Wes did not breathe. The hidden stairwell suddenly felt too narrow, too exposed. 1 choke point in, 1 choke point out. Good for defense, bad if the other side already owned the terrain. Axel stared upward, muscles rigid beneath his dark coat. Another sound drifted down through the floorboards. The sheriff's boots, slow, measured. Not a man afraid of what he might find. A flashlight beam sliced through thin gaps between the pantry boards overhead, moving across dust and concrete in pale strips. Wes lowered himself 1 step deeper into shadow and touched 2 fingers lightly against Axel's ribs. Hold. The dog stayed perfectly still. Then Sheriff Mercer spoke again. "You can come out, Wes." The use of his first name landed harder than the threat itself. Not because it was familiar, because it meant the sheriff had already been asking questions long before tonight. "You're not trespassing," Mercer continued calmly. "That house belongs to you now." Silence. Wes kept one hand on the tire iron and the other near the flashlight clipped to his vest. His pulse slowed instead of rising. Combat calm, the dangerous kind. Above them, another set of footsteps crossed the kitchen. Heavier, less patient. Doors fresh, a second man muttered. Somebody opened it. Mercer answered quietly enough that Wes barely heard him. I know. The second man said, You want me to pull the wall? No. A pause. Then the sheriff sighed softly through his nose. Not tonight. Wes frowned slightly. That wasn't what he expected. The pantry floor creaked overhead as Mercer shifted his weight. When your brother started digging around old county records, the sheriff said, I told him the same thing I'm telling you now. Another pause. Some things under this mountain should stay buried. Then the footsteps retreated. Not rushed, not nervous, just deliberate. The front door opened upstairs. Cold wind swept briefly through the old house. A truck door slammed outside. Engine noise rumbled to life. Axel waited another full minute before relaxing even slightly. Wes stayed frozen longer than that. Only when the truck finally faded down the mountain road did he let out a slow breath. The bunker suddenly felt colder. He climbed halfway up the stairs and carefully pushed the hidden door open 2 inches. The pantry was empty. Moonlight stretched pale across the kitchen floor. The chair still lay tipped sideways near the doorway where Mercer had moved it. Wes closed the door again quietly. They know, he murmured. Axel stared at him. Yeah, Wes said. I know. Back inside the bunker room, the silence had changed. Before, it felt forgotten. Now it felt watched. Wes moved fast. He opened drawer after drawer in the filing cabinets, scanning labels and dates, while Axel patrolled tight circles through the room. Most of the records centered around water contamination reports, mining permits, and medical histories. But every few folders, Wes found photographs paper-clipped to handwritten notes. Children, families, dead livestock near streams, men standing beside rusted barrels half buried in snow, always with Caleb's notes in the margins. Sample contaminated, county denied testing. Mercer warned me again. One folder stopped Wes cold. It contained satellite photographs, Black Ridge from above, sections of forest highlighted in red marker. Beneath one photo, Caleb had written, secondary burial site active as of 2019. Wes stared at the date. Active, not abandoned, not history, present tense. Axel suddenly moved toward the radio table and sniffed at something underneath it. Wes crouched beside him. Taped beneath the metal surface was a small key, brass, old-fashioned. A paper tag dangled from it. The handwriting was Caleb's. If Mercer finds the house, don't trust the mine. Wes read it twice, then a third time, the mine. His eyes drifted toward the sealed silver mine entrance outside the property. Danger, unsafed ground, keep out. Maybe not meant for trespassers after all. Axel nudged the key with his nose. Wes slipped it into his pocket. He returned to the cassette recorder and pressed play again. Static crackled. Then Caleb's voice returned, lower now, rough with exhaustion. If they're moving again, it means Redstone's scared somebody. Will finally connect the illnesses to the disposal pits. A cough interrupted the recording. Long, painful. They used old mining shafts after Iraq, Caleb continued. Convoys came through at night. Unmarked containers, some military, some private contractors. Dale Mercer signed transport clearance himself after he left Redstone's security. Wes looked toward the ceiling instinctively. The sheriff had been inside this house minutes ago. Right above them. They buried solvents, depleted equipment, chemical runoff, Caleb said. Things nobody wanted audited. Another pause. Then Caleb's voice changed slightly, more personal. If you're listening to this, Wes, I'm sorry. Wes froze. The recorder hissed softly. I should have called you years ago, after Dad died, after Donna left you. Hell, after Fallujah. Caleb let out a tired breath. I kept thinking I had time. Wes sat down heavily in the metal chair. Somewhere above the bunker, the old house groaned in the wind. You weren't broken when you came back from Iraq, Caleb said quietly. You were just carrying too much alone. Wes shut his eyes. For one ugly second, he saw heat shimmering off Iraqi asphalt again. Saw smoke climbing into the white sky after an IED strike. Heard screaming through radio static. Then Axel rested his head gently against Wes's knee, grounding him, pulling him back. Wes opened his eyes slowly and scratched behind the dog's ears once. "Still here," he whispered. The tape continued. "If Mercer knows you found this place, he won't wait long. He'll smile. He'll act reasonable. But he'll move." A scraping noise interrupted the recording suddenly. Then Caleb's breathing sharpened. "He's here," he whispered somewhere away from the microphone. Wes leaned forward. A door slammed in the background of the tape. Then came another voice, muffled, male. Wes couldn't make out the words. Caleb cursed softly. "Damn it!" The tape crackled violently. Then faint but unmistakable. A dog barking. Not Axel, another shepherd. Wes frowned. The barking turned frantic, then came shouting, a loud metallic bang. And finally Caleb's voice, distant now, yelling, "Run!" Gunfire cracked once somewhere in the background. The tape cut dead. The bunker went silent. Axel lifted his head sharply toward the second locked steel door again. Wes followed the dog's stare. The faint vibration beneath the floor had returned. Stronger now, like machinery cycling deeper underground. Then came another sound. Not mechanical, a soft thud. From the other side of the second door, Axel's growl rolled low and dangerous through the bunker. And this time, something on the other side growled back. Wes did not move at first. The sound was wrong for machinery. Too low, too alive. It rolled through the seam of the second steel door and settled in the bunker like a warning from the mountain itself. Axel bared his teeth. "Easy," Wes whispered. The dog did not take his eyes off the door. Another thud came from the other side. Then a scrape, metal against concrete. Something shifting its weight in a space that had been sealed for years, or something made to sound that way. Wes backed toward the radio table, keeping the flashlight low. The beam shook once, barely, then steadied. He swept it across the floor and saw what he had missed before, a cable. Thin black wire running from the bottom of the second door, along the wall, half buried under dust, leading behind a stack of filing boxes. He followed it with the light. There, wedged behind the boxes, was a small speaker, old, cracked, wired into the door system. Wes stared at it. The growl came again. This time he heard the static underneath, recorded, not alive. Axel still growled, but his ears shifted slightly, catching the trick now. "Psychological deterrent," Wes murmured. Caleb had built traps with fear instead of bullets. Smart. Wes moved the boxes aside. Behind them, mounted low on the wall, was a narrow metal panel with a rusted key slot. He pulled Caleb's brass key from his pocket and tried it. It fit. The panel opened with a soft snap. Inside were 3 toggle switches and a handwritten note taped to the metal. "Wes, if Axel found this, trust him before you trust the floor, see." Wes looked down slowly. The concrete in front of the second door was not one slab. It was 4 panels, each separated by hair-thin seams, pressure plates, maybe, or old access covers. Either way, Caleb had left the warning for someone who understood working dogs and bad rooms. Axel stepped back without being told. Wes did the same. He switched off the speaker. The bunker fell into a silence so complete it seemed to press against his eardrums. Then, from upstairs, glass broke. Wes snapped the flashlight off again. Axel turned before the sound finished. Not the kitchen this time. Front room. Someone had entered the house. Wes moved fast but quiet. He grabbed 2 folders from the medical drawer, the cassette marked April 11, and the photograph with "They Knew" written on the back. He tucked them inside his coat, then started up the stairwell with Axel tight behind him. Halfway up, he smelled it. Smoke. Not fireplace smoke. Kerosene. His body changed before his thoughts did. Low. Move. Breathe shallow. At the pantry door, orange light flickered through the cracks. Wes eased it open. The kitchen was empty, but smoke crawled along the ceiling in dirty gray layers. Somewhere near the back mudroom, flames licked up the wall where old coats had been hanging. The fire had been set inside. Axel pushed past him and lunged toward the front room. Barking once, sharp and hard, Wes followed. A shadow moved outside the broken front window. A man in a dark jacket sprinted off the porch and vanished into the pines. Wes did not chase him. Fire first. He grabbed the old quilt from the couch, threw it over the flames in the mudroom, and stamped hard until his bad knee screamed. Smoke burned his eyes. The world narrowed to heat, coughing, orange light, and Axel barking from the kitchen. Then the dog changed tone. Not alarm, warning. Wes turned. A line of fire had caught near the pantry wall, eating toward the hidden door. If it reached the bunker entrance, everything below could fill with smoke. Or worse, burn the evidence before Wes even understood what he had found. He shoved a chair aside, pulled down the small fire extinguisher, mounted near the stove, and prayed it still held pressure. It did. White powder blasted across the wall, choking the flames into wet black scars. Wes coughed until his ribs hurt. Axel suddenly yelped. Wes spun around. The dog was near the broken window, paw lifted, blood dark against the fur of his front leg. A shard of glass had cut deep across the pad. Axel. Wes crossed the room and dropped to one knee. The shepherd tried to keep standing. Of course he did. Down, Wes said softly. Axel resisted for half a second, then obeyed. Wes pulled off his own scarf and wrapped the paw tight. The dog's breathing came fast, but his eyes stayed locked on the window. Still working, still guarding. Outside, engine noise started down by the tree line. Wes moved to the broken glass and looked out from the edge of the frame, careful not to silhouette himself. A gray Ford F-250 rolled slowly out from behind the pines, headlights off, snow dusting the hood. It paused at the bottom of the drive just long enough for Wes to see the shape of the driver's profile. Sheriff Dale Mercer. Then the truck turned downhill and disappeared into the dark. Wes stood in the smoke-stained front room, one hand pressed against the wall to steady himself. The house was still standing. The bunker was still hidden. Axel was bleeding on the floor, and the sheriff had just stopped pretending this was a visit. Wes looked down at the dog. Axel lifted his head, ears trembling, and gave one weak thump of his tail against the floorboards. Wes swallowed hard. Yeah, he whispered. I saw him too. Outside, far below the mountain, the gray truck's taillights vanished into the trees. But in the fresh snow beneath the broken window, Wes noticed something else. 3 sets of boot prints, not one, and one of them led away from the house, toward the sealed mine. Wes stared at the print until the cold worked through the soles of his boots. The track was clean, pressed deep into fresh snow. Whoever made it had not run. He had walked with purpose from the broken window, across the yard, past the leaning shed, and toward the old mine fence as if he knew exactly where he was going. Axel tried to stand. Stay down. The dog froze, but his eyes stayed on the tree line. Wes wrapped the scarf tighter around Axel's injured paw, then tore a strip from an old dish towel and tied it over the first layer. The cut was ugly, but not life-ending. Still, the sight of dark blood staining the floorboards made something hard and protective settle behind Wes's ribs. You saved my old hide again, he murmured. Axel's tail moved once. By dawn, the house smelled of smoke, wet ash, and burnt pine. Wes had not slept. He spent the night moving between windows, keeping low, checking the yard by moonlight, then returning to the kitchen to make sure Axel's bandage held. When the sky began to pale over Black Ridge, he loaded the most important folders into his duffel and drove into town. Axel rode in the passenger seat, paw wrapped and resting on an old sweatshirt. He kept his head up the whole way, though his eyelids sank at every turn. Nora's diner was just opening when Wes pushed through the door. Nora looked up from wiping the counter. One glance at his smoke-streaked coat and Axel's bandaged paw, and her face changed. What happened? Had a little trouble at the house. Her eyes flicked toward the 2 men drinking coffee in the back booth. Wes saw the movement. He chose the stool nearest the door. Need a vet, he said. There's one in Hamilton. Hour and a half if the pass is clear. Too long. Nora set the rag down. Dr. Emily Ross knows animals well enough. She used to help her father run cattle before medical school. Clinics behind the pharmacy. Wes nodded once. Nora leaned closer, voice low. Was it Dale? Wes did not answer. That was answer enough. Nora's mouth tightened. I told Caleb to leave it alone. What was he asking? She looked toward the back booth again. One of the men was pretending not to listen. Nora poured coffee into a paper cup and slid it across. He asked about sick kids, wells that went bad, old miners who vanished after signing complaint forms. Then he asked about Redstone Minerals. Wes kept face flat. What did you tell him? That my husband worked for Redstone before he died. The diner seemed to quiet around her words. Nora looked at Axel, liver cancer, 49 years old, never drank, never smoked. Doctor called it bad luck. Her fingers tightened round the coffee pot handle. Black Ridge has a lot of bad luck. Before Wes could answer, the bell over the door jingled. Sheriff Dale Mercer stepped inside. He wore his uniform clean and pressed, hat dusted with snow, face open and calm like a man arriving for breakfast after church. His eyes moved once around the diner, landed on Wes, then on Axel's bandaged paw. Morning, Wes. Wes picked up the coffee cup. Sheriff. Dale walked to the counter and nodded to Nora. Coffee, please. Nora did not move for a second, then she poured. Dale turned back to Wes. Heard there was smoke up your way last night. Old wiring. That house has plenty of problems. Dale lifted his cup. Wouldn't surprise me if the whole place comes down one day. Axel growled. Low. Several people turned. Dale looked at the dog, then smiled without warmth. Smart animal. Wes placed a hand on Axel's shoulder. He knows what people smell like. The sheriff's smile thinned. For a moment, nobody in the diner moved. Forks hovered over plates. Coffee steamed. Snow tapped softly against the window. Then Dale set a $5 bill on the counter. You be careful up there, he said. Mountains can swallow a man faster than war ever could. He left without finishing his coffee. Wes watched through the window as Dale climbed into his cruiser and drove away. Only then did Nora speak. You need to go see Emily. The clinic behind the pharmacy smelled like antiseptic old paper and coffee gone bitter on a hot plate, doctor. Emily Ross was in her early 40s, with dark hair pulled back hard and tired eyes that missed very little. She took one look at Axel's paw and pointed to an exam table. Lift him if he'll let you. Axel allowed it, though Wes could feel the dog tense at being handled. Emily cleaned the cut with careful hands. Axel did not whine. He only watched Wes the whole time, ears low but steady. Glass? She asked. Window. House fire. Small one. She glanced up at him. Small fires don't usually come with that look. Wes said nothing. Emily stitched the pad, wrapped it properly, then gave Axel an injection for infection. The shepherd finally lowered his head onto the table and exhaled through his nose. Emily washed her hands. Nora sent you because she trusts you, she said. I trust Nora, so I'll ask once. Did you find something at Caleb's place? Wes studied her face. Not fear, not greed. Something worn down and waiting. He pulled the photograph from inside his coat and set it on the counter. The little girl in the yellow coat smiled up at them from another decade. Emily did not touch it at first. Then her hand went to her mouth. That's Lily Marsh, she whispered. You knew her? I treated her symptoms before anyone knew what they were. She was 7. Emily picked up the photo with 2 fingers, turned it over, and read Caleb's words. They knew. Her eyes closed briefly. My son had the same markers in his blood work, she said. The room became very still. Wes looked down at Axel, whose eyes had opened again at the change in her voice. Emily set the photograph down. Caleb came to me before he disappeared. He had water samples, old company records, a list of names. He said, Redstone buried more than mining waste under that ridge. What happened after? He stopped coming. Wes pulled out the cassette. His tape says he worked Afghanistan contracts after 9/11. Says Redstone used Black Ridge for disposal. Emily looked toward the frosted clinic window. Dale Mercer worked private security for Redstone before he became sheriff. I know. She turned back. No. You don't know enough. Her voice dropped. Dale's father was county commissioner when the permits vanished. His brother sits on the water board. His cousin runs emergency dispatch. You call local 911, you're calling them. Wes absorbed that without blinking. Axel shifted, trying to rise. Emily put a gentle hand near the dog's shoulder. Easy, soldier. Axel settled. The word soldier hung between all three of them. Wes looked at the bandage, then at Emily. I found boot tracks to the mine. Her face paled. Don't go in there. Why? Because Caleb did. Outside, a snowplow scraped along the street, loud enough to make Wes's shoulders tighten. He looked toward the window before he could stop himself. Emily noticed but said nothing. That silence made him trust her a little more. She opened a locked drawer beneath her desk and removed a small envelope. Caleb left this with me, she said. Told me if anyone ever came asking about the mine and had a German shepherd with them, I'd know. Wes stared at her. Emily handed him the envelope. Inside was a Polaroid photo, faded but clear. Caleb stood near the sealed mine entrance. Beside him was another German shepherd, older, gray around the muzzle. On the back, Caleb had written one line. The dogs always find the door first. Wes felt Axel press his head against his hip. Then, from somewhere outside the clinic, a car door closed. Emily moved to the window and pulled the blind aside barely an inch. Her breath caught. Wes already knew before she spoke. A gray Ford F-250 sat across the street, engine running, watching the clinic. The gray Ford sat across the street beneath drifting snow, exhaust curling into the pale afternoon air. Nothing marked it as official. No county decals, no emergency lights. That somehow made it worse. Wes stayed back from the window automatically, shifting just enough to keep the truck in sight through the edge of the blinds without exposing his silhouette. Old habits. Never stand centered in glass. Emily let the blind fall shut. He's getting bolder, she murmured, or impatient. Axel slid carefully off the exam table despite the fresh bandage. The shepherd limped once, then steadied himself beside Wes's leg, staring toward the front of the clinic, watching the truck too. Wes crouched and checked the wrap around Axel's paw. No fresh blood yet. You shouldn't be walking on it, Emily said. Axel ignored her completely. Wes almost smiled. Yeah, he muttered. He does that. Outside, the Ford's headlights blinked once. Signal, not accidental. A second later, another pickup rolled slowly past the clinic and continued down the street without stopping. Black Dodge, snow chains, two men inside. Wes tracked it through the blinds. They're setting a perimeter. Emily looked at him sharply. You sure? Wes nodded once. Lead vehicle watches the front. Second unit checks movement routes. His eyes drifted toward the alley behind the clinic. Means they don't want us leaving clean. Silence settled heavily between them. The heater rattled softly in the corner. Down the hall, someone coughed in another exam room. Normal little town sounds, but under them now ran something tighter, hidden, like the whole town had been holding its breath for years. Emily crossed her arms against the cold. If Dale wanted to arrest you, he would. He doesn't want paperwork. The truth of that landed hard in the room. Wes slipped Caleb's Polaroid into his coat pocket and looked toward the rear hallway. Back exit? Emily nodded slowly. Leads into the alley behind the pharmacy. Anybody back there? Not usually. Wes thought for a moment. Then another memory surfaced. Fallujah. Narrow alley behind a market street. A corporal named Jensen stepping too fast around a blind corner. The sound afterward. Wes blinked the memory away before it fully formed. He looked down at Axel. The dog was already watching the back hallway. Ready? Okay, Wes said quietly. We move slow. Emily frowned. You really think they'd do something in broad daylight? Wes looked at the gray Ford idling outside. Yes. That answer seemed to drain something from her. Not surprise. Denial. The last little piece of it. She grabbed her coat from the wall hook and opened a drawer beneath the counter. From it, she pulled a revolver wrapped in a dish towel. Wes raised an eyebrow. "My father raised cattle outside Helena," she said. "You don't survive winter calving season without learning a few things." She checked the cylinder with steady hands. Not experienced hands, but not helpless either. Wes nodded once. "Keep it low. Don't point it unless you mean it." Emily slipped the revolver into her coat pocket. Axel suddenly stiffened, not toward the street, toward the clinic entrance. Footsteps, heavy, coming up the front porch. Wes moved instantly. He killed the exam room light and guided Emily sideways behind the door frame. Axel lowered himself beside the counter, without command, ears flat, body tense. The footsteps stopped outside. A shadow crossed beneath the frosted glass of the clinic door. Then came 3 slow knocks. Nobody moved. Another knock, then Sheriff Dale Mercer's voice. Calm as ever. "Emily, silence. I know you're in there." Wes watched the doorknob carefully. No twitch yet. Dale sighed softly through the wood. "You don't want to get mixed up in this." Emily's jaw tightened. Wes could hear her breathing speeding up beside him. Dale continued. "Caleb dragged good people into something dangerous. Don't repeat his mistake." Axel's lips pulled back soundlessly. The knob turned slightly. Locked. A pause followed. Then Dale's voice lowered. "I saw the smoke at the Carter place last night. Next fire might spread faster." Emily shut her eyes briefly. Threat received. Wes stepped closer to the wall beside the door, tire iron loose in his right hand. The sheriff stayed outside another few seconds. Then his boots creaked across the porch boards and faded away. Wes waited. 5 seconds, 10, 20. Only then did he ease toward the window again. The gray Ford pulled away slowly from the curb and disappeared downhill. But the black Dodge remained parked half a block away, watching. "Damn it," Emily whispered. Wes looked at her. "You got somewhere safe?" "No, you got family?" Her hesitation answered before her words did. "My son's buried here." Wes nodded once. Understood. Some people stayed because leaving hurt worse. He glanced at the hallway again. "We can't stay." Emily swallowed hard but nodded. The rear exit opened into a narrow alley lined with snowbanks and rusted dumpsters. Wind funneled between the buildings, hard enough to sting the eyes. Wes stepped out first. Quick scan. Left clear. Right. Movement. A man near the alley mouth turned too late after spotting them. Heavy jacket. Ball cap pulled low, one hand lifting toward his coat. "Back," Wes snapped. The man lunged forward. Axel exploded before Wes even finished the word. The shepherd hit the man square in the chest, despite the injured paw, slamming him against a dumpster with a metallic crash. The man cursed and stumbled sideways as Axel barked once deep, violent, military precise, not panic barking, engagement barking. Wes grabbed Emily's arm. "Move!" They ran. Snow crunched beneath their boots as they cut behind the pharmacy toward the side street. Wes glanced back once. The man had recovered, but Axel still stood between him and the alley exit, teeth bared. "Axel!" The dog broke away instantly and sprinted after Wes with a slight limp. "Good boy. Very good boy." They reached the Chevy parked behind the diner. Wes shoved Emily into the passenger side while Axel jumped into the back. The engine coughed once before catching. Then another engine roared nearby. The black Dodge swung around the corner fast, too fast for icy streets. Wes slammed the Chevy into reverse. The Dodge fishtailed toward them. Emily grabbed the dashboard hard enough for her knuckles to whiten. Wes cranked the wheel, spun the truck around the alley mouth, and punched the gas. The Chevy slid sideways onto Main Street. For half a second, the world outside the windshield became white snow and spinning storefronts. Then the tires caught. The truck shot forward downhill. Behind them, the Dodge followed. Wes checked mirrors automatically. Distance, road conditions, possible turns. No police lights, no sirens, not law enforcement, pursuit. Axel braced himself across the back seat, ears pinned, eyes fixed on the rear window. Wes's pulse stayed strangely calm, like his body had been waiting years for something to make sense again. Emily looked over at him. "What do we do now?" Wes stared at the snowy highway unwinding ahead through the mountains. "We find the mine," he said. Behind them, the black Dodge accelerated, and somewhere beneath Black Ridge Mountain, hidden under snow and stone, machinery kept humming in the dark. Wes kept both hands loose on the wheel, not tight. Tight hands overcorrected. The Chevy rattled down the mountain road, tires fighting for grip on packed snow. The black Dodge gained behind them, its grille filling the rearview mirror, headlights bouncing hard over the ruts. Emily braced one hand against the dashboard and the other against the door. Axel stood across the back seat despite the bandage on his paw, his weight shifting with each turn, eyes locked on the pursuing truck. "Seatbelt," Wes said. Emily stared at him. "What seatbelt?" She dragged it across her chest and clicked it just as Wes cut the wheel left onto an old logging spur. The Chevy slid. For a second, the truck floated sideways toward the ditch. Wes let it slide, then feathered the gas. The rear end swung around. Tires bit gravel beneath the snow, and the Chevy shot between two walls of pine. The Dodge tried to follow too fast. Its back end fishtailed wide and clipped a snowbank with a hard crunch. Emily looked back. They hit the bank. Not enough. The road narrowed until branches scraped both sides of the Chevy. Snow slapped the windshield in bursts. Wes killed the headlights. Emily sucked in a breath. "What are you doing?" Making us harder to read. The world became moonlight, pine shadows, and memory. Wes knew how to drive in darkness by contrast. White snow, black tree trunks, low ground where the shadows pooled. He had done worse in Iraq with blackout markers and dust thick enough to taste. A white flare popped in his mind. Not real. He blinked once. The road stayed there. Stay in the truck. Stay in Montana. Behind them, the Dodge's headlights bounced through the trees, too bright and too high. The driver had not killed them. Good. That meant he wanted to see more than he wanted to hide. Amateur mistake, or angry mistake. Either one could be used. Wes took the next bend hard, then braked suddenly and swung the Chevy behind a stand of lodgepole pine, where the spur widened near a frozen creek bed. He killed the engine. "Down," he whispered. Emily folded forward immediately. Axel dropped low across the back seat, but his head stayed lifted just enough to watch through the rear window. The Dodge roared past 10 seconds later. It did not stop. Its headlights vanished around the bend. Wes waited. 5 seconds. 10. 30. He started the Chevy without lights and backed slowly onto the spur. Emily's breathing came fast but controlled. "You've done that before," she said. Wes kept his eyes on the dark road. Different road. Axel gave a low sound from the back seat, not quite a growl. Wes followed the dog's stare. Ahead, between the trees, a red glow pulsed once. Brake lights. The Dodge had stopped, blocking the road near the old mine access. Wes shut the engine off again. Silence dropped over them. Then came a voice through the trees. Not loud. "Radio. Unit 2 at upper track." No visual. Emily turned toward Wes. "Unit 2, so there were more." Wes eased the door open and stepped into the snow. The cold hit his smoke-burned lungs and made him cough once into his sleeve. Axel climbed out after him, landing carefully on 3 good paws. "Stay close," Wes whispered. The dog ignored the injury and moved like shadow beside him. Emily came last, revolver tucked low in her coat pocket, face pale in the dark. They left the truck where it sat and moved into the trees. Wes led them downhill at an angle instead of following the road. He chose places where the snow had crusted over, stepping on exposed roots, rocks, fallen logs. Axel understood immediately and matched him step for step. Emily struggled at first, then began placing her boots where Wes had placed his. After 50 yards, Wes stopped and raised a fist. Emily froze. Axel crouched. Voices ahead. 2 men, one by the mine fence, one closer to the road. Wes lowered himself behind a fallen pine and looked through the branches. The sealed mine entrance sat in a shallow cut into the mountain. Concrete slab across the opening, chain link fence bowed inward from years of snow. The warning sign hung crooked in the moonlight. Danger, unsafe ground, keep out. The black Dodge idled near the gate. A man stood beside it with a radio in one hand. Another man knelt by the fence, working at something Wes could not see. Not sheriff's deputies. Their posture gave them away. Too alert, too quiet, boots placed deliberately. Jackets dark, no badges visible. Contract security, maybe ex-military. Maybe worse, men who thought tactical gear made them soldiers. The radio crackled. A voice came through. Clear the AO. Find the veteran. Retrieve the files. Wes felt Emily stiffen beside him. The man by the truck answered. Copy. Dog 2. A pause. The reply came colder. No witnesses. Axel's body tightened. Not from the words. From Wes. The anger moved through him before he could stop it. Not loud anger. Not hot. The kind that went quiet and clean. The man at the fence stood and pulled the section of chain link aside. It had not been cut tonight. It had been made to open. A hidden access point. Caleb had been right. The mine wasn't sealed. It was a door. Wes leaned close to Emily's ear. Back to the truck. Now, she whispered. What about you? I need to know where that goes. No. He looked at her then. She looked back just as hard. Axel suddenly turned his head uphill. Wes saw the dog's ears shift. Something behind them. Snow compressed softly under a boot. Wes grabbed Emily and pulled her down as a flashlight beam swept over the fallen pine. Contact, one voice snapped. The word hit the air like a thrown knife. Wes moved. He shoved Emily behind the trunk, snatched a fist-sized rock from the snow, and threw it hard to the left. It cracked against a tree. Both flashlights swung toward the sound. Axel launched right. The shepherd hit the nearest man from the side, knocking him into the snow with a grunt. Wes was already moving, low and fast, closing distance before the second man could bring his light back. He drove his shoulder into the man's ribs, slammed him against a tree, and stripped the radio from his hand. No flourish, no speech, just impact, leverage, and an old body remembering old work. The man dropped to one knee, gasping. Wes kicked his flashlight into the brush. Emily, move! They ran for the mine fence, not the truck. The truck was bait now. Behind them, shouting erupted through the trees. The man Axel had hit cursed and rolled, but the dog stayed between him and Wes, limping, teeth bared, refusing to give ground. Axel! This time the dog hesitated. Only a second. Too long. A third man emerged near the Dodge and raised something black. Wes saw the motion before the sound. Down. A shot cracked through the pines. Snow jumped from a tree trunk near Axel's head. Axel broke and sprinted toward Wes, his bandaged paw leaving dark marks in the snow. Emily slipped through the hidden gap in the fence first. Wes followed, pulling it wide for Axel. The dog squeezed through last, just as another shot snapped into the chain link. They plunged into the mine entrance, not through the concrete slab, beside it. Behind a sheet of rusted metal and ice, a narrow passage opened into the mountain, black as a throat. Wes clicked on his flashlight for half a second. Old timber supports. Steel track, fresh boot prints in the dust. Then he killed the light. Voices shouted outside. Radio static burst from the device in his hand. Veteran entered lower access. Repeat. Veteran entered lower access. A different voice answered immediately. Sheriff Dale Mercer. Seal the Ridge Road. Nobody leaves Black Ridge. Wes looked down the tunnel. Cold air moved from somewhere deep inside. Axel limped forward into the darkness, nose low, following a scent older than the chase behind them. Emily whispered, "Where does this go?" Wes tightened his grip on the stolen radio. Caleb. Far ahead in the dark, metal clicked once. Then an old overhead light flickered to life by itself. Wes stopped so fast, Emily nearly walked into his back. The bulb hanging 30 yards down the tunnel buzzed weakly, swinging on a rusted wire. Its yellow light did not reach them completely. It only painted the old mine tracks, broken timber supports, and damp rock walls in pieces. Axel stood in front of Wes, nose low, body angled toward the light, not toward the men behind them. Toward whatever had turned that bulb on. Emily whispered, "Is that supposed to happen?" "No." Wes lifted the stolen radio near his ear, static, then a voice. Lower access tripped. Another voice answered, farther away. "Motion relay still works?" "Looks like it." Wes clicked the volume down until the radio was barely breathing in his hand. So the light wasn't a welcome. It was an alarm. He looked back toward the entrance. Voices echoed outside the mine, muffled by stone and snow. They had minutes at most. "Move," he whispered. They advanced in the dark strip beyond the bulb's reach. Wes kept one hand near the rock wall, not because he needed support, but because the mountain told stories through vibration. Old mines shifted before they failed. Water moved before it broke through. Men trying to be quieted still carried weight into the ground. Axel limped, but he kept point. Every few yards, Wes saw signs that the mine had never truly been abandoned. Newer cables stapled along old beams, scrape marks on the floor, boot prints crossing decades of gray dust. On one wall, spray-painted arrows pointed deeper into the tunnel, marked with letters and numbers that did not belong to mining crews. LZ3, Ow South. Wes stared at the letters. Emily saw him looking. What does that mean? Military shorthand. In a silver mine. Wes didn't answer. Far behind them, metal rattled. The fence. The men were coming in. Wes guided Emily and Axel off the main tunnel into a side cut barely wide enough for one person at a time. He killed the flashlight and pressed 2 fingers against Axel's collar. Hold. Boots entered the mine behind them. 2 men at least, maybe 3. Their lights swept the main tunnel in sharp white cones. One passed across the side cut, inches from Wes's boots. No one breathed. A man muttered, "Tracks go forward." Another said, "Dogs bleeding, we'll find them." Axel's body tightened at the sound. Wes felt the dog preparing to move and pressed his hand harder against the collar. Not yet. The men continued down the main tunnel toward the flickering overhead light. Only when their footsteps faded did Wes ease his grip. Axel gave one soft breath through his nose. Good. They waited another count of 20, then slipped back onto the main path. Emily moved closer to Wes now, her face pale in the weak light. "How far does this go?" "Far enough for Caleb to hide something." The mine descended gradually. The air changed with each step. Less snow, more mineral water, rust, old earth. Somewhere deep below, machinery hummed again, steady as a sleeping animal. Then Axel stopped, his nose lifted. He turned sharply left toward a collapsed timber barrier where rocks had spilled across a narrow opening. To anyone else, it looked like dead passage. Axel nosed the stones, then scratched once at the ground with his good paw. Wes crouched. Under dust and rock grit was a thin line of black rubber, a cable. He pulled gently. It ran under the barrier and into the blocked passage. Emily whispered, "Can we get through?" Wes studied the gap. Tight, dangerous, but not impossible. He removed his coat, pushed his duffel through first, then crawled after it on elbows and knees. Rock scraped his shoulders, dust filled his mouth. Halfway through, the passage narrowed. His chest pressed against stone. For one violent second, he was under concrete again. Not Montana, not a mine. A crushed culvert outside Fallujah, air thick with dust, someone screaming his name from the other side. His fingers dug into the dirt. He stopped moving. Axel whined from behind him. One quiet sound. Just enough. Wes exhaled slowly, emptying his lungs until his ribs sank. Then he slid through. On the other side, the passage opened into a chamber cut from the mountain. Emily came through next, coughing. Axel squeezed after her, dragging his bandaged paw but refusing help. Wes turned his light on. The chamber was not large, but it was full of ghosts. Old miner helmets hung from nails on the wall, not stored. Placed. Beneath them were names written on masking tape, each one yellowed with age. Thomas Vance, Earl Bennett, Miguel Ortega, Samuel Pike, Howard Crane. More names followed. Men the town had called unlucky. Men the mountain had supposedly taken. Emily covered her mouth with one hand. These were the missing miners. Wes moved slowly through the chamber. On a metal table lay complaint forms, medical reports, and photographs of barrels buried under snow. Redstone minerals appeared again and again in faded letterheads and stamped permits. Then Axel lowered his head and walked to the far corner. He did not growl. He did not bark. He simply stood there. Wes followed. Behind a torn canvas tarp was a shallow recess in the rock. Inside lay a weathered coat, a cracked hard hat, and a human skeleton curled against the wall, as if the man had sat down there to rest and never stood again. A faded backpack rested beside him. Wes saw the name patch before he touched anything. C. Carter. The tunnel sound disappeared. Emily said something, but Wes did not hear it. He knelt slowly. The bones were clean now, time having done its quiet work. Around the neck hung a set of dog tags on a rusted chain. Wes removed his glove before touching them. Caleb Carter. His brother had not run. His brother had not vanished into drink or shame or some far-off town. He had made it this far into the mountain with the truth in his hands, and no one beside him when the dark finally closed in. Wes sat back on his heels. Axel lowered himself beside him, pressing his body against Wes's leg despite the injured paw. For a long time, nobody spoke. The machinery hummed deeper inside Black Ridge. Far behind them, faint voices echoed through the mine. Wes finally reached into Caleb's coat pocket. His fingers closed around a plastic card sealed in a waterproof sleeve, a key card, still intact. Printed across the front were 3 words, Redstone Secure Access. Then the radio in Wes's pocket crackled. Sheriff Dale Mercer's voice came through clear and cold. They found the chamber. Burn it if you have to. Emily's eyes snapped to the radio in Wes's hand. The words seemed to hang in the little rock chamber, settling over the old helmets, the taped names, Caleb's remains, and Axel lying close with his bandaged paw stretched out on the cold dirt. Burn it, not search it, not secure it, erase it. Wes turned the radio volume down until the static became a faint insect buzz. Then he looked at Caleb. For 9 years, Wes had carried his brother as an argument that never ended. The angry man outside the VFW, the silent phone, the birthday cards never mailed. Now all that noise had become a set of dog tags resting against old bones in a forgotten mine. He slipped the tags carefully into his coat pocket. Emily knelt beside the table, hands moving fast now, collecting files with the practiced calm of someone who had spent years working around crisis. She stacked medical reports, photographs, complaint forms, anything that named people and dates. "We can't leave this," she whispered. "We can't carry all of it." "Then what?" Wes looked at the redstone keycard in his palm. The answer was somewhere deeper. Axel lifted his head first. A second later, Wes heard it too. Footsteps in the tunnel behind them, more than one. Fast. He grabbed the duffel and swept the folders into it. Time. Emily slung the bag over her shoulder. Wes helped Axel up, one hand under the dog's chest. The shepherd put weight on the injured paw and nearly buckled, then forced himself steady. "Easy," Wes murmured. Axel ignored him and limped toward the back of the chamber. Not toward the entrance, away from the men coming. There, behind Caleb's resting place, the rock wall narrowed into a natural cut, half hidden by old boards and a sheet of rusted tin. Axel nosed the boards, then looked back. Wes pulled them aside. A service passage, barely wide enough. Cold air moved through it. Caleb had an exit, Emily said. Wes shook his head. Not an exit. A route. They slipped into the passage just as flashlights swept into the chamber behind them. "Movement," someone shouted. Wes pushed Emily ahead, then Axel, then crawled in last, dragging the tin sheet partly back into place behind him. Light struck the wall outside. Boots hammered into the chamber. A man coughed. "Fuel cans are here." Another voice. Boss said, "Burn it." Wes stopped moving. Emily froze ahead of him. Axel pressed flat to the ground. The sharp smell of accelerant cut through the dust. Wes's jaw tightened until his teeth hurt. He could picture it. Men splashing fuel across Caleb's files, the helmets, the names, the bones, turning every missing man into smoke because a county badge told them to. His hand found a loose rock in the passage. He wanted to go back. Axel turned his head and looked at him. Not pleading, commanding, move. Wes exhaled through his nose and crawled forward. The passage sloped downward into the mountain. Rock scraped Wes's back. Cold water dripped somewhere ahead. Behind them, flame bloomed with a soft whomp that rolled through the passage like a living thing. Emily gasped. Orange light flickered through cracks behind them. Smoke began to chase. Wes pushed harder. Keep moving. The passage opened suddenly into a concrete corridor. Not mine tunnel. Concrete. Poured walls. Electrical conduit. Red warning stripes faded but visible along the floor. A small sign mounted beside a sealed blast door read, "Redstone Minerals, secure storage, be beneath it." An old card reader blinked one weak green light. Still powered, Wes pulled out Caleb's keycard. Behind them, smoke thickened in the passage. He swiped once. Nothing. Again. The reader beeped low, angry red. Emily coughed into her sleeve. Wes. He wiped the strip on his jeans and swiped a third time. Slower. The reader hesitated. Green. The blast door unlocked with a heavy internal thump. Wes grabbed the wheel handle and turned. The door opened inward, releasing a wave of cold, recycled air. Axel went first. Emily followed. Wes stepped through and sealed the door behind them just as smoke rolled into the corridor outside. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. They stood inside a room that did not belong beneath any mountain town in Montana. Rows of server towers lined the walls, old but running. Green and amber lights blinked in slow, patient patterns. A diesel generator throbbed somewhere below the floor, sending vibration through Wes's boots. Metal cabinets stood open, filled with hard drives, backup tapes, and binders stamped with federal contract numbers. On the far wall, a bank of monitors displayed grainy camera feeds. The house, the mine gate, the road, Nora's diner, Emily's clinic. Wes stared at the screens. "They've been watching everything," Emily whispered. On one monitor, the fire in the mine chamber burned white-orange. On another, Sheriff Dale Mercer stood outside Dead Pine House beside his gray Ford, phone to his ear, face lit by dashboard glow. Wes moved toward the central desk. A computer sat awake. Not modern, but maintained. The screen showed a locked program with a blinking cursor. Enter Access Credential. Beside the keyboard was a small cassette recorder, newer than the others, with one tape inside. A sticky note clung to it for Wes. "If you made it this far." Emily looked at him. Wes pressed play. Caleb's voice filled the server room, clearer this time. "You found storage B good. Means the dog still knows better than we do." Wes looked down at Axel. The dog had lowered himself near the doorway, panting lightly, eyes still alert despite pain. Caleb continued. "Everything is here. Redstone contracts, waste manifests, waterboard payoffs, medical suppression, names of the men who signed off, names of the men who disappeared." A pause, then a tired laugh. "I tried to send it once. They cut the uplink and nearly caught me. So I built a dead man's switch off the old satellite relay. Ugly system, but it'll work if the generator holds." The generator beneath them coughed. Once. The lights flickered. Wes looked up. Caleb's tape kept playing. "If you activate it, the files go to the FBI, EPA, VA oversight, 3 newspapers, and a Senate office that owes me a favor. But listen to me, Wes. Once you start it, they'll know. Mercer will come straight down. He always does when he's scared." Emily moved to the monitors. On the screen showing the mine gate, 3 men were running toward the lower access. Caleb's voice softened. "And one more thing. If you find me before you find this room, don't waste time feeling sorry. I made my choices. Just finish the mission." The tape clicked off. Wes stood very still. The server screen changed by itself. A new prompt appeared. "Dead man's switch ready. Enter final confirmation." Before Wes could touch the keyboard, the generator below coughed again. Harder, the lights went out. For one breath, The entire server room dropped into absolute black. Then emergency lights snapped on, bathing everything in dim red. Axel growled toward the sealed door. From outside in the corridor came the heavy sound of metal being forced open. Wes moved before the second strike landed. He shoved Emily behind the central server rack and swept one arm across the desk, clearing space around the keyboard. The emergency lights threw red shadows across the room, turning the steel cabinets and blinking server towers into something that looked alive. The door shook again. A dull boom rolled through the concrete. Not a kick, ram. They brought tools, Emily whispered. Wes scanned the room fast. One entrance, no windows, no secondary exit visible. Concrete barrier around the generator access panel near the floor. Server racks bolted down. 2 steel storage cabinets, a rolling chair, loose cables, fire extinguisher, emergency lamp. Not much. Enough. He grabbed the fire extinguisher and rolled it across the floor to Emily. If they breach, pull the pin and spray low. Eyes and lights. She nodded once, both hands tight around the red cylinder. Axel limped forward. Wes blocked him with his knee. No. The shepherd looked up at him. Amber eyes bright in the red light. No. Wes repeated, quieter this time. Axel stayed beside him anyway. The door boomed again. A crack appeared along the seal. Through it came voices. Doors giving. Mercer says no files leave. Another hit. The frame groaned. Wes crouched behind the server rack nearest the door, keeping the stolen radio in one hand. His pulse counted the seconds for him. Old training, old rhythm. Let them enter through the fatal funnel. Make them crowd themselves. Use their panic. The door gave way with a shriek of steel. It opened only 2 feet before catching on its bent frame, but it was enough. A flashlight beam stabbed into the room. Wes threw the rolling chair hard into the opening. It struck the first man's knees. He stumbled forward, cursing, and the second man crashed into his back. Their flashlights jerked upward. Now, Wes said. Emily pulled the pin and squeezed. A white cloud blasted across the doorway, thick and choking, filling the red-lit air with powder. Men coughed and shouted. Wes moved low along the server rack, not toward them but across their line of sight. The first man swung blindly. Wes caught his wrist, twisted hard, and drove him shoulder first into the metal cabinet. The man dropped. Axel barked once and lunged at the second man's sleeve, dragging him off balance. Axel. The dog held just long enough. Wes slammed the man into the doorframe with his forearm and stripped a pistol from his hand before it cleared the holster. He kicked it under the server rack. No shots yet. Good. Then the third man fired from the corridor. The round punched into a server tower beside Wes, showering sparks and plastic fragments across the floor. Emily ducked behind the desk as glass from a small monitor burst outward. Axel yelped. Wes turned. The shepherd staggered, his back leg slipping under him. Not the paw this time. His shoulder. Dark blood spread through the fur near his upper leg. Something inside Wes went still. Very still. The kind of stillness that came right before men made mistakes they regretted forever. He grabbed Axel by the harness and dragged him behind the concrete generator barrier. The dog tried to stand again immediately. Down, Wes said, voice breaking around the word. Axel obeyed, but his eyes stayed on the door. Emily crawled over, pressing both hands to Axel's wound. It went through soft tissue, she said quickly. I think it missed bone. Wes heard her, but his eyes were on the doorway. The third man stepped in carefully, now, weapon raised, face hidden behind the glare of his flashlight. Wes waited until the man crossed the bent threshold. Then he killed the emergency lamp with a thrown wrench. The room snapped into deeper red darkness. The man's flashlight became his weakness. Wes came from the side. One strike to the wrist, one to the ribs, one hard shove into the server rack. The weapon clattered across the floor. The man fell and did not get up. For 3 seconds, the server room held only the generator's failing throb, Emily's breathing, and Axel's soft, wet panting. Then the radio crackled. Dale Mercer's voice. Report. Wes picked it up slowly. He pressed the transmit button. Your boys are down. Silence. Then Dale said, Wes. The name came through almost gently. You always were hard to kill. Wes stared at Axel's blood on his hands. I learned from better men. Dale exhaled over the radio. You don't understand what you're holding. You think this is about bad men doing bad things. It isn't. It's about keeping a town alive. Redstone kept the school open, paid for the clinic, paid pensions when the mine closed. You send those files, Black Ridge dies. Emily lifted her head, eyes wet and furious. My son died drinking that water. The radio stayed silent a moment. Then Dale said, colder. A lot of people died for this town to survive. Wes looked toward the computer screen. The red glow had returned to it. Dead man's switch ready. Enter final confirmation. Below it, one line blinked. Generator power. 11%. Emily pressed harder against Axel's wound. Wes, she said. He understood. If the generator died, the upload might die with it. If they waited, Mercer would come down himself. Wes moved to the keyboard. His hands hovered over the keys. A password field waited beneath the prompt. Final confirmation required. He tried Caleb's birthday, rejected. He tried their father's initials, rejected. The generator coughed below them, 9%. Behind the sealed corridor, another distant metal door opened. Slow steps echoed now, not rushed. Dale coming personally. Wes stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Then Axel whined. A small sound from the floor. Wes looked down. The dog's head had turned toward Caleb's cassette recorder, lying beside the keyboard. Caleb's last words returned in Wes's mind. Just finish the mission. He typed. Finish the mission. The screen went black. For one horrible second, nothing happened. Then green text appeared. Confirmation accepted. Upload armed. Final send. Outside the room, Sheriff Dale Mercer's voice echoed down the corridor. Step away from that computer, Wes. Wes looked at Axel. The dog lifted his head despite the blood, despite the pain, and held his eyes. Wes pressed Y, and somewhere above Black Ridge, the truth finally started moving. Files, names, buried reports. Everything Caleb died trying to protect was no longer trapped under the mountain. Maybe that's what loyalty really looks like. Not medals, not speeches, just one tired man and one wounded dog refusing to quit when everybody else already had. If Axel made you tear up even a little, type 1 in the comments. And if you believe some truths are worth risking everything for, type stay. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell, because the next story, waiting in the dark, might be even more unbelievable than this one. Until next time, stay safe out there, and listen when your dog starts growling at the walls.